Bangladesh remains in a political deadlock as anticipation mounts for a new era of leadership, barely a week after former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was forced to resign and then fled the country. Protest leaders have set a deadline. They are expecting members of the interim government to be finalised by today. Incoming leader and Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus says he will work with relevant parties to rebuild Bangladesh as soon as he returns to the capital, Dhaka, tomorrow. The 84-year-old, who is currently in Europe, has appealed for calm and urges citizens to refrain from all kinds of violence. The formation of the next government has revived calls for the opposition. Earlier, members of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party gathered in the capital, demanding officials hold a general election within the next 3 months. Ousted Prime Minister Khaleda Zia made her first public appearance since being released from house arrest yesterday. She addressed supporters, vowing to end the politics of vengeance that has plagued the country for decades. Earlier, at least 300 protesters forced the resignation of 4 deputy governors at Bangladesh's central bank amid accusation of corruption. Meanwhile, garment factories across the country have reopened. Authorities say they are expected to resume full operations after production was disrupted by violent protests this week. The garment industry accounts for 90% of Bangladesh's exports. Let's get more now from Neha Poonia, joining us live from New Delhi. Neha, India has ordered all its non-essential embassy staff to flee. What else are Indian authorities doing to protect citizens that are still in Bangladesh?
Well, Jill, we don't have an official comment or a statement from the Indian government, but what we do know is by way of sources in the government, and that is this, that India's High Commissioner to Bangladesh is still in Dhaka. All the diplomats associated with various missions are also in the country, which means India's diplomatic missions are still operational in Dhaka, as well as its consulates in Chittagong, in Sylhet, and 2 other Bangladeshi cities, but they're operational with skeletal staff. What we have seen is that non-essential staff associated with these missions and their families have returned. The government says that this was done, though, on a voluntary basis, and indicating it was not an evacuation. We did see several commercial aircraft fly to Dhaka on Wednesday morning and bring back about 400 people. The government is saying that it is in close contact with Indian nationals still in the country. There are about 19,000 Indians there, out of which 9,000 are students. We've seen various members of parliament on Wednesday express concern about their security and safety. India has also issued a helpline, but it's not executing an evacuation plan like we've seen in similar situations in other parts of the world in the past. But the focus very much on seeing what happens in the next few days.
Now, Sheikh Hasina, she's been spotted, last seen in India, in Delhi, in fact. What more do we know about her whereabouts?
That's right, Jill. We saw her flee Bangladesh in those dramatic scenes, and her arrival in New Delhi on Monday also grabbed headlines. We saw India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval meet her on Monday evening. On Tuesday, India's Foreign Minister confirmed that she was in India, did not specify where she was, but reports suggest she's being put up in a safe house. He also said he's not at liberty to discuss what her movements might be or how long she'll be staying here. The sense was that India would not host her long-term, given the sort of public anger that still exists in Bangladesh, and hosting her could jeopardize New Delhi's ties with the next government in Dhaka. But Sheikh Hasina has reportedly run into trouble in trying to seek political asylum in Europe as well as the UK. We're given to understand that the UK doesn't have a system that allows for direct asylum, and the rules mandate that the safest way to get political asylum would be in the country that the person who's seeking it first arrives, which would be India. Now, India is unlikely to host her long-term, experts say, especially with the new government expected to be coming to power in Dhaka in the next few days. There's already pressure mounting with some groups in Dhaka saying India should arrest Hasina and hand her over to Dhaka, and that would be an act of good faith given she needs to be held accountable for her crimes.
All right, thanks so much for that. Neha Poonia joining us live from New Delhi. Well, the chief advisor to the Bangladeshi interim government is a familiar figure to locals. Muhammad Yunus rose to prominence by introducing micro-lending to the poor. But while this earned him international recognition and public support, it did little to drive his political ambition.
He's known as Banker to the Poor, the Nobel laureate who introduced microloans to poverty-ridden Bangladesh, arch-rival to former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, whose post he takes over, if only temporarily and in an advisory capacity. Now leading the Bangladeshi interim government, 84-year-old Muhammad Yunus is not new to the political game. He worked his way up by giving out loans out of pocket to the poor. And this would eventually lead to his founding the Grameen Bank in 1976. The lender granted small loans to the poorest of the poor, giving them the capacity to invest or boost their income. It didn't take long for other countries to start copying Mr. Yunus's template. But he's also had his critics like Sheikh Hasina, who once accused him of sucking blood from the poor. The Nobel Foundation felt differently. In 2006, Mr. Yunus won the Peace Prize for pioneering microfinance. A year later, he attempted to form his own party, Citizen Power, but had to abandon the plans within months. In 2011, the government forced him out of Grameen Bank, saying Yunus, in his 70s at the time, was well past retirement. Thousands formed a human chain to protest his ouster. 2 years later, the US Congress would also recognize his efforts by making him the first Muslim to be awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, America's top civilian award. At home, public support is marred by more than 100 cases of graft, labor law violations and embezzlement. He has been sentenced but never jailed. Mr. Yunus says the cases are flimsy and all made up. He's hailed 5th August as the second liberation day for Bangladesh after its 1971 independence from Pakistan. Mr. Yunus says it's critical that trust in the government be restored quickly and a roadmap to new elections be made. He's also clarified he's not seeking an elected role or appointment beyond his interim role as chief advisor.